Hello, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we are learning how to guard our minds against all of the various manipulative tactics that play on us throughout the 21st century social media cultural landscape. If you've been watching the last few videos, we've been discussing a number of things which regard the concepts of materialism, nihilism, eugenics, and think tanks. We've covered a fair amount of ground with respect to what all of these things are. We have also examined how these things can and do affect our thinking to the degree that they shape and form our worldview. Materialism has some deeply problematic flaws when it comes to understanding the total picture of reality. Particularly the metaphysical and spiritual aspects that we run into every day throughout all of our lives. As much as the philosophy itself and those who hold to it would like to believe, there are aspects to reality that are not easily and readily measurable or even reducible to simply physical components. While this lack within the philosophy poses serious issues regarding the big questions and their answers like how and why are we here, it also sets in motion a series of outcropping effects which ostensibly strip all that is of any inherent value and meaning. When this type of thinking is allowed to be taken to its logical conclusions, we're left with a postmodern mess where all is relative, and humans are of no more value than the grains of sand which get washed away with every swell of the rising tides. Even the tides don't actually matter, and really all will eventually be destroyed in the eventual heat or cold death of the universe, when finally all the material components run out of their inherent energy. They exhaust themselves of it, the law of entropy takes over, and we're left with nothing. Under this worldview, we run into serious danger when it comes to living well and thinking clearly due to the fact that our core level contextual understanding of who we are and why we're here has been stripped of all its truth. To give credit, yes, all of what we see is made up of its material components. But the problem with simply stopping there when we're seeking to understand reality is that we're left with an incomplete picture of the truth of what we are dealing with. When we start from incomplete foundations, we set off on a trajectory that winds up dramatically off course, which has rippling effects into every area of our lives. A practical example of this can be found in the navigation of airlines. The heading that a plane is supposed to be undertaking must be exact from the start. If the nose of the plane shifts just 1 degree in any direction, left, right, up, or down, the course will be shifted in dramatic ways. Over long stretches of time and distance, these small details can create huge problems. It works the same with worldviews and philosophical ways of understanding truth. The core principles we live with day to day are what inform us about how we think and how we respond to and treat the world around us. To that end, it's best to think and live with truth as our core guiding principle. And by that I mean the real truth, and all that comes with it, not some watered-down version that allows us to feel the best about the most things in our lives. The world is inundated with a materialist worldview. It is pervasive and gives rise to all manner of illogical and bad thinking, which causes a great deal of suffering and pain. But things were not always like they are today. How did we get here? What sorts of things were allowed to take root and run through society, causing us to wind up with this particular state of things? There are many paths to take when addressing this question. Some are more complex and dig into some really deep-level issues that have been in existence really since the beginning of human understanding and time. And others are much more simple. One trajectory that is worthwhile is to examine a bit of what we discussed a few videos back, that being the nested narcissism that is present within a materialist worldview. I should state that I will not be focusing on what's commonly understood as clinical malignant narcissism. The type that I am thinking of is more mild and somewhat manageable, actually even widely accepted, even praised in part, which is actually, it makes it more dangerous than the other more extreme versions of narcissism in a certain way. But this narcissistic trait that all people have at varying degrees is more akin to a self-centeredness which, over time, has been overdeveloped through various response-reward programming at multiple layers of society. This has always been an issue in people and in people groups, yet the 20th century is a standout, particularly when it comes to the mass scales at which the programming was put into effect. For this reason, the 20th century is known as the century of the self. What we see in the 21st century is the product of some very large and very well executed plans that were put in motion many, many decades, even centuries ago. What I want to dig into over the next series of videos is the concept of long-term programming in society, such that entire generations would abandon rational thinking and be willing to freely give up their own power over their lives. This has been an overarching theme of the channel so far, and it's time we take a look at some of the names, events, and ideas that shaped the 20th century in order to understand where we are now. If we want to know where we're heading, we should examine where we have been. In earlier videos, we discussed some of the experimental psychology of Wilhelm Wundt and the Leipzig Laboratory, which made its way over to America through funding by the Rockefeller family and others. We will pick up where we left off on that topic with John Dewey and his ideas for reforming education into a type of socialization training. We'll pick that back up in a few videos, but for now, we'll take a quick look at another German psychologist whose work would go on to spawn one of the most well-run and thorough thought and behavior control programs that the world has ever seen. Technically an Austrian, Sigmund Freud is considered today as one of the pillars of clinical psychology and is the founder of what is known as psychoanalysis. His work is world-renowned, and his name is synonymous with the study of psychology and the inner workings of the human mind. The term Freudian gets tossed about these days to refer to things that we have kept hidden in our subconscious. Freud's ideas about the subconscious are truly remarkable, and they are the basis for much of our current understanding regarding human behavior and why we think in the ways that we do. While his work is incredibly important, we're not going to dig into him specifically here, but more so the work of one of his relatives. Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, was a seriously powerful and influential man throughout the 20th century. He was well aware of his uncle's work and would utilize the concept that Uncle Siggy was developing to usher in a methodology that would be used by government and big business to shape society into one that would yield the future that they desired. Freud had come to the conclusion that humans are basically irrational beings, and as such are driven and governed by their subconscious or unconscious fears and desires. It is this tendency in all humans that Edward Bernays would take and capitalize upon in order to sow the seeds that would grow into a media and propaganda empire that would take over the social consciousness of most of the developed world. In his book, Propaganda, Bernays wrote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. He also said, "Intelligent men must realize that propaganda is the modern instrument by which they can fight for productive ends and help to bring order out of chaos." We cannot go a single moment of our day in the 21st century without coming into contact with the fruits of Bernays' legacy. It is for this reason that the next series of videos will be focused on who Edward Bernays was, what he believed, how and where he operated, and to what ends he was working. There is a lot to uncover, and much of it may lead to some important questions regarding our own failures to resist the manipulations that have been so dominating throughout the last century. Hopefully, by looking at the way that things have gone, and the underlying motives and players who directed the movements, we can begin to see things clearly and push back against all of the tactics and mechanisms that are operating on us, and then take back control of our thoughts and behavior. Please join me while we learn about the things against which we must stay diligent, vigilant, always keeping our minds on guard.